From the beginning of humankind, practitioners have been seeking knowledge on their individual paths. Those paths climb to the highest peaks, the lowest valleys, through the mud bogs and swamps, through the warm meadow plains, pouring rains, and beyond, on a never-ending quest for knowledge. When those seekers find themselves lost in the woods, sometimes they'd find the crone or the warlock in the back of them, the elders, the wise ones, the teachers. So, park your ride, pour a cuppa, and set for a spell. You found your way to the Crones Cauldron. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kimberly Spice, and I will be your hostess this evening. Before we get started, I know that tonight's topic is, empaths 101, and forgive the traffic if it happens to interfere. With the term empath, this seems to be the latest 21st century rendition of a number of labels that they've given those who are sensitive to energy that most people, as we like to call them normals, either don't admit they feel, or the ones that do seem to think they're crazy. The empath, or the sensitive, or I believe in the 60s and 70s they termed them the psychic, and we all know what that means these days. We know them commonly as sensitives. At least that's how we label the kids. Good evening, Mrs. Brown. Welcome. Thanks for everybody joining us in the chat room. It's nice to see y'all. For those of you who are tuning in for a podcast, try and make a live show. We have a live chat room, and it gets pretty lively in there, so come along and join us. One thing I do want to get into before I get into the bulk of the meat of this, I have a list of 30 signs of being an empath. I didn't actually come up with the list. I've had it for a few years, so if anybody knows who the author is, please let me know. I'd gladly give them credit. And I mean, these are just, the 30 most common traits of an empath or a sensitive. 1, just knowing. We just know stuff without being told. It's a knowing that goes way beyond intuition or gut feelings, even though that's how many describe this knowing. And the more attuned the empath is, the stronger this gift becomes. 2, being in public places can be overwhelming. Places like shopping malls, supermarkets, stadiums, anywhere there's lots of people around can feel an empath with turbulently vexed emotions that are coming from others. 3, feeling others' emotions and taking them on as your own. Now, this is a big one for empaths. To some, they will feel emotions off of those nearby, and others will feel emotions from people that are a vast distance away, or both. The more adept the empath is, the easier time they'll know of having that someone having bad thoughts about them even from a greater distance, or if somebody needs you or your assistance from a great distance. 4, watching violence, cruelty, or tragedy on TV is unbearable. Now, this includes online and other news agencies and other places that we get inundated with just stuff. The more attuned we are, the worse it is, and it makes it so that eventually we may have to stop watching TV or reading newspapers altogether. 5, when someone is not being honest. Even if it's a friend or a loved one that's telling you lies, you know it. Although many empaths try not to focus on this because knowing a loved one is lying can be painful. Or if someone is saying one thing and feeling or thinking another, you know. 6, picking up physical symptoms off of another, and this is actually quite common. An empath will almost always develop the ailments off of another. Cold, eye infections, body aches, pains, especially for those they're closest to. It's something like a sympathy pain. And no, Bernie, I haven't got an intro yet. I'm working on one. 7, digestive disorders and lower back problems. The solar plexus chakra, is based in the center of the abdomen. It's also known as the seat of emotions. This is where empaths feel the incoming emotions of others, which can weaken the area and eventually lead to anything from stomach ulcers to IBS and many other conditions that I'm not going to list here. Lower back problems can develop from being ungrounded, amongst other things, and one who has no knowledge of them being an empath will almost always be ungrounded. 8, you're always looking out for the underdog. Anyone who's suffering in emotional pain or being bullied draws an empath's attention and compassion. 9, others will want to offload their problems onto you, even strangers. An empath can become a dumping ground for everyone else's issues and problems, which if they're not careful can end up as their own. 10. Constant fatigue. Empaths are often drained of energy, either from energy vampires or from just taking on too much from others. And this is something even sleep will not cure. Many end up diagnosed with myocardial encephalitis or heart disease. Now, this is also very common amongst mediums. 11. Addictive personality. Alcohol, drugs, sex are to name but a few addictions empaths can turn to block out the emotions of others. It can be a form of self-protection in order to hide for someone or something, meaning the external emotions. 12. Drawn to healing, holistic therapies, and all things metaphysical. Although many empaths would love to heal others, they can end up turning away from healing, even though they have a very natural ability to do this, after they have studied and qualified, because they take on too much from the ones they're trying to heal, especially if they're unaware of their empathy. And anything of a supernatural nature is of interest to empaths, and they don't get surprised or shocked easily, even at the revelation of what many others would consider unthinkable. For example, empaths would have known the world was round when others believed it was flat. 13. Creative. From singing, dancing, acting, drawing, writing. An empath will have a strong creative streak and a vivid imagination. 14. Love of nature and animals. Being outdoors in nature is a must for empaths, and pets are an essential part of their life. 15. The need for solitude. An empath will go stir crazy if they do not get quiet time, and this is very obvious even in empathic children. 16. They get bored or distracted easily if they're not stimulated. Work, school, and home life have to be kept interesting for an empath, or they switch off from it and end up daydreaming or doodling. What? Am I not being heard? Can you hear me now? Oh, yay! Okay, apparently I hit the wrong button. My bad. I'm sorry, folks. Oh, it's one of those days. Mercury really should be in retrograde. Glad to see you've made it into the chat room. Apparently, I was late making it into the studio via the button. Bernie, I will have an intro with music and such next week. Forgive me for being a little bit late, folks. With tonight's topic, it's Empaths 101. Before I get started, just a bit of a blanket statement. Empaths are empath, period. It's just the 21st century term for what people would call gifted, sensitive, psychic, that sort of thing. I do have a list of 30 signs of an empath. I don't know who actually wrote the list. This is one I scooped from quite some time back. And if anybody knows of the author, please let me know. I'd love to give them credit. Can somebody give me a heads up in the chat room if we can hear me now? Bonus. Thank you very much for letting me know that I'm actually broadcasting. Okay, now the 30 traits of the psychic empath. Like, this goes back, my ancestors called us gifted. I believe in the 80s they were called sensitive. 60s, 70s they were called psychic. Empath is just, 21st century term. 30 common traits. 1. Knowing. Empaths just know stuff without being told. It goes way beyond intuition or gut feelings, even though that's how many describe this. The more attuned they are, the stronger it becomes. 2. Being in public places is overwhelming. Places like shopping malls, supermarkets, stadiums, gatherings of large people can fill the empath with turbulently vexed emotions that are coming from others. 3. Feeling others' emotions and taking them on as your own. This is a really huge one for empaths, and to some they'll feel emotions off of the people that are nearby, and others feel emotions from those a vast distance away, or both. The more adept the empath, the better they are at figuring out who it's coming from, and if it's good, bad, or if they need your help. 4. Watching violence, cruelty, or tragedy on TV is unbearable. The more attuned the empath is, the worse it is, so they may eventually have to stop watching TV or reading newspapers altogether. 5. You know when someone's not being honest. If a friend or loved one is telling you lies, you know it. Although many empaths try not to focus on this because knowing a loved one is lying to you is painful. If someone is saying one thing and feeling or thinking another, you know. 6. Picking up physical symptoms off of one another. An empath will almost always develop the same ailments: colds, eye infections, body aches, pains, especially with those that they're closest to. It's kind of like sympathy pain. 7. Digestive disorders and lower back problems. The solar plexus chakra is based in the center of the abdomen, and it's known as the seat of emotions. This is where empaths feel the incoming emotions of others, and it weakens the area and can eventually lead to anything from stomach ulcers to IBS and too many other conditions to list here. The lower back problems can develop from being ungrounded, amongst other things, and one who has no knowledge of them being an empath will almost always be ungrounded. 8. You're always looking out for the underdog. Anyone who's suffering any emotional pain or being bullied draws an empath's attention and compassion. 9. Others will want to offload their problems onto you, even strangers. An empath can become a dumping ground for everyone else's issues and problems, which, if they're not careful, can end up as their own. 10. Constant fatigue. Empaths are often drained of energy, either through energy vampires or from simply taking on too much from others, which even sleep does not cure. Many are diagnosed after a long term of this with myocardial encephalitis or heart disease, which is quite common amongst mediums as well. 11. Addictive personality. Alcohol, drugs, sex, or to name but a few addictions empaths turn to block out the emotions of others. It can be a form of self-protection in order to hide from someone or something, meaning the external emotions. 12. They're drawn to healing, holistic therapies, and all things metaphysical. Although many empaths would love to heal others, they can end up turning away from healing, even though they have a natural ability for it. After they've studied and qualified, they can take on too much from the one they're trying to heal, especially if they're unaware of the empathy. Anything of a supernatural nature is of an interest to an empath, and they don't surprise or shock easily, even at the revelation of what many others would consider unthinkable. For example, empaths would have known the world was round when others believed it flat. 13. Creative. From singing, dancing, acting, drawing, or writing, an empath will have a strong creative streak and a vivid imagination. 14. Love of nature and animals. Being outdoors is a must for empaths, and pets are a natural, essential part of their life. 15. Need for solitude. An empath will go stir crazy if they don't get personal quiet time. This is obvious even in empathic children. 16. They get bored or distracted easily if not stimulated. Work, school, and home life have to be kept interesting for an empath, or they switch off from it and end up daydreaming or doodling. 17. They find it impossible to do things that they don't enjoy. As with the one I previously mentioned, it feels like they're living a lie by doing so. To force an empath to do something they dislike through guilt or labeling them as idle will only serve to make them unhappy. For this reason, many empaths get labeled as being lazy. 18. They strive for the truth. This becomes more prevalent when an empath discovers their gifts and birthright. Anything untruthful just feels plain wrong. 19. They're always looking for answers and knowledge. To have unanswered questions can be frustrating for an empath, and they will endeavor to find an explanation. If they have a knowing about something, they'll look for confirmation. The downside to this is an information overload. And I'm notorious for doing this to myself, and at least I did for many, many years. Overload is very easily done, and we'll get more into that later. 20. Likes adventure, freedom, travels. We empaths are free spirits. 21. And now this isn't true for everybody, but I know it is for most. They abhor clutter. It makes an empath feel weighed down and actually blocks the flow of energy. Now, if any of you have seen the practice of feng shui, you'll know about the energy movement in a room. It works exactly on that same principle. 22. Loves to daydream. An empath can stare into space for hours in a world of their own and blissfully happy. 23. Finds routine, rules, or control imprisoning. Anything that takes away their freedom is debilitating to an empath and even poisoning. 24. We're prone to carry weight without necessarily overeating. The excess weight, especially around the belly area, is a form of protection to stop the negative incoming energies having as much of an impact. 25. Excellent listener. An empath won't talk about themselves much unless it's to someone they really trust. They love to learn and know about others and genuinely care. 26. An intolerance to narcissism. Although kind and often tolerant of others, empaths do not like to be around overly egotistical people who put themselves first and refuse to consider anyone else's feelings or points of view other than their own. 27. The ability to feel the days of the week. An empath will get the Friday feeling if they work Fridays or not. They'll be able to pick up on how the collective are feeling. The first couple days of a long bank holiday weekend, Easter for example, can to them feel like the world is smiling, calm, and relaxed. Sunday evenings, Mondays, Tuesdays of a working week generally tend to have a heavy feeling. 28. Will not choose to buy antiques, vintage, or second hand. Anything that's been pre-owned carries the energy of the previous owner. An empath will even prefer to have a brand new car or house if they are in a financial situation to do so with no residual energy. 29. And I know this is true for myself, we can sense the energy of food. Many empaths don't like to eat meat or poultry because they can taste and feel the vibrations of the animal, especially even if the animal suffered. And even if we like the taste, we'll know it doesn't taste right. 30. And this is one that seems to apply pretty much across the board. We can appear moody, shy, aloof, and disconnected. Depending on how an empath is feeling will depend on the face they show to the world. They can be prone to mood swings, and if they've taken on too much negativity, will appear quiet, unsociable, even miserable. An empath detests having to pretend to be happy when they're not. This only adds to their load, which makes working in the service industry, when it's service with a smile, very challenging and can make them feel like scuttling under a stone. Now, keep in mind, this is just 30 common traits. These all come about because of the energy that we pick up around us. Now, a number of things will go into that. The people around us, the energy of the world around us. But see, things like lunar phase, tidal pull, planetary retrogrades, and alignments all play into this. Now, that's on a greater level. Now let's bring it back to where you sit. Part of the environment around you includes exactly that. Look around. We often will hear about EMF, an electromagnetic field, and dirty electricity and that sort of thing. The basis of the empathic skills that pretty much we all embody or carry with us, as I've been seeing in the chat room, all operate on an electromagnetic frequency. That's what the aura is. And when we have EMF and things like Wi-Fi and cell towers and all sorts of man-made electricity and EMF static on top of that, it actually does mess with the physical body, the spiritual work, and your mental processes as well. Now, if you're exposed to enough of it, it can actually make you sick. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, unusual sleep patterns. All of that is a result of some of this that's incoming from just every day-to-day stuff around you. This includes your laptop, your smartphone, your tablet, anything that's got a wireless signal. There are things you can do to lessen that, and I know some people that actually turn off their Wi-Fi at night. There are others who keep, like myself, a salt lamp, a Himalayan salt lamp lit next to it because it transmutes it. There are stones you can carry that transmute or block it, things like pyrite. which I carry, Herkimer quartz, malachite. These also help keep you naturally grounded, because with EMF, just like the auric field and other energy that we take in from around us and absorb like a sponge, it's got to go somewhere, which means you need to keep yourself grounded. Now, here's some of the best ways to do so. And you'll hear me talking about grounding a lot. Now, grounding and earthing are really, really closely related, but they're not the same thing. Now, earthing, this one is especially important, and it's something we so rarely do anymore. In old times, it was automatic. We'd be regularly handling plants for food. We would be running barefoot. Instead, now we buy our groceries instead of growing them, and we are sold little insulating pieces of rubber to wear. That doesn't help. Well, the simple act of actually walking on grass or soil, like a beach or a forest paths, provides a means of earthing. Another is to garden, be it a flower bed, a vegetable garden, growing a house plant. If you're out and about and you can't stick your hands in your house plants, lean up against a tree. Better yet, hug it. There's a reason the hippies were tree huggers, you know. With the increasing EMF in our environment from cell towers, Wi-Fi signals, and other dirty electricity waves around us, our bodies become overcharged with positive ions that are disruptive and destructive to both physical body and mental health. And it's these ions you actually need to rid your body of physically, and the benefits of which are many overall. Reduced inflammation by diffusing excess positive electrons, reducing chronic pain, improving sleep, increasing energy, lowering stress and promoting calmness by reducing stress hormones. And yes, ladies and gents, this includes the cortisol that creates your body to hold on to that excess belly fat. That's part of the reason it starts to melt away. This can normalize your biorhythms, including your circadian rhythm, improving blood pressure and blood flow. It relieves muscle tension and headache. I notice this. I used to be really prone to migraines. It lessens menstrual and female hormone symptoms. It can speed healing, and it's even used in some places to prevent bed sores. It can eliminate jet lag. It protects the body from EMFs. It shortens recovery time from injury or athletic activity, reducing or eliminating snoring. It actually does help with that one, folks. And it helps support your adrenal health. Cortisol and adrenaline are both triggered by neurochemical processes in the brain, and those particular processes are triggered by stress. Physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress doesn't even have to be yours. You just have to be under stress for these to occur. When you're in a pinch and you're not able to readily earth yourself, there are other means of grounding. Crystals work wonders. Boji stones, shaman stones, hematite, bloodstone, Herkimer diamond, pyrite, malachite. They're all beneficial for grounding and need to be cleansed, charged, carried, or worn to help keep you naturally grounded while you're out and about. Many carry their crystals with them in a small pouch and sleep with them under their pillow. I do this regularly. I also have a number of shiny pieces of jewelry that have crystals set in them specifically for this purpose. Now, for those of you that are interested in crystals, in just a few weeks, I will have Reverend Ron with me to actually go over crystals and some properties that you guys might find of use and of benefit to you. Now, keep in mind, it's important to note not all stones are treated the same way. Some can be cleansed in waters, others require salt immersion. Some require nothing more than buffing with a soft, dark cloth. Selenite never needs to be cleansed at all, and it can be used to clean others. It's entirely dependent on the type of stone. Some require charging in moonlight, others in full sun. Some do not require charging at all. All of them, however, do need to be awakened and purposed. Extreme caution should be used with elixirs and such, as many stones have toxic elements when ingested. Smudging and clearing. This is especially helpful for clearing your physical body, your auric field, and personal space. You can do it in several ways. Burn sage, sweetgrass, other fragrant herbs. Be sure to watch the smoke. It'll tell you about the energy in your surroundings. If it's hanging low and not moving, the energy is thick and heavy. As it begins to work, you'll see it move and swirl throughout the rooms. You may need to help it through this during this process by waving the smoke into the corners and upper areas. Leaving a window or a door cracked to open a small amount will give the leaving energies an exit. It will also help to build a spiritual barrier as well. For those who are sensitive to smoke and other airborne irritants, a room spray can be made with pure water. Essential oils such as rose, lavender, and citrus can be used. Exercise caution with this one, however, as not all furniture, drapery, and rugs react well with certain oils. Leather, especially, is notorious. It does not like citrus. It will stain, dry, and crack. Trust me, I know. Water. First of all, we should be drinking, 6 cups or up to 2 liters of pure water a day to replace what we lose through sweat, urination, and other environmental factors. This also helps the body to flush toxins and rush nutrients to the proper areas. Especially in the morning, it's helpful in these ways. Drinking water on an empty stomach in the morning purifies the colon and allows for better absorption of nutrients into your system. 2, to help with weight loss, drinking at least 16 ounces of water in the morning can boost your metabolic rate by up to 24%. Water in the morning hydrates your cells at a superior rate after hours of fasting, i.e. sleeping. The rush of hydration of the cells helps production of blood and muscle cells. It helps with your actual muscle regeneration. It helps you to heal. The high dosages of water to help purge the systems of toxins through the bowels help leave you with glowing skin. It also helps to flush and balance your lymphatic system, which leads to increased immunity, helping you fight a variety of illnesses. Taking out the steps I've listed to filter out what is yours and what is incoming from the outside are going to help significantly. As we get a little further into this, we're going to explore, the internal levels of being that, need to be brought into a balance so you can begin to function as you're meant to. Now, keep in mind the lesson that I'm actually reading from, folks, is one of the lessons on the Crones Cauldron page on Facebook. This is a lesson I wrote quite some time back. So if you're not actually on the page, come find me, Kimberly Spice, Kimberley, Spice, sugar and spice, SPICE. Hit me up and I'll add you to the page. You can find all of these underneath the Files tab, so feel free to go ahead and check it out, folks. With being an empath, and this is where I'm going to actually deviate from the lesson that I was just reading from, because that's only part of it. We often pick up sludge and junk and garbage and energy from everywhere around us. And it's from the environment we live in, from the food we eat, to the computers we're all sitting in front of, or the radio stations we're listening to now. We pick stuff up. And quite frequently and quite famously, we do not purge this. Now, often, and I come across this with my people, with a lot of the people that come to me, my students, my clients, and others that just kind of find their way to my door, and much like yourselves, find themselves gathering around my cauldron. We run into trouble because there's so much clog and so much junk and so much garbage. What happens when you live in your own garbage? You get sick. Well, it doesn't always show as physical symptoms. Sometimes you end up emotionally sick, mentally sick, spiritually sick, and you're never quite sure why. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the life of being an empath. Wonderful, isn't it? So, what do we do with all of this stuff that we pick up? Oodles of it. What do we do with it? What do we want to do with it? First thing you need to do is get rid of what is not yours. The incoming, we actually can enforce our own shields, folks. We have them. It's called an aura. And I know a fair many of the people that are in the room, the chat room this evening, are probably practitioners. The odd one may not be. For those of you who are used to working with auric fields, it should be familiar to you. For those of you who aren't, the simplest and easiest way I was taught to strengthen my own auric field as a child, and we should do this every morning and boost it throughout the day. Close your eyes. Take a couple of good deep breaths and pull all of your energy into the very center of your solar plexus chakra. And then I want you to push it out as far as your arm can stretch. And I want you to picture yourself surrounded as thick as you can put them. Silver and gold dust motes. You'll see little sparkles floating in the air. And you need to repeat to yourself 3 times. And this is your mantra. This is what's going to snap this into place for you. Silver and gold armor surround me. Silver and gold armor surround me. Silver and gold armor surround me. And when you can sense and you can feel that shield, open your eyes. Some people have actually even been able to physically see it from the inside. Occasionally, I've come across people that have been able to see it from the outside too, which is kind of a trip because I'm not used to people that do that. At least not ones that admit it to me. But this helps to keep a lot of the random oddball stuff at bay. Now, you probably are going to have to earth and ground and shield yourself regularly until you become strong enough and you've cleared enough internal junk out of the way and unclogged your filters that it will become pretty much automatic. And I mean, I myself, personally, horribly struggled with this. It wasn't until I started actually working with Reiki therapy, both Reiki energy therapy and Reiki sound therapy, that I managed to knock some of this stuff loose. And I'm forever grateful to the Reverend Ron for this, because he was the one that actually opened my eyes to what my body was trying to tell me. Really, really great healer in his own right, and I'm very, very fortunate to have him as my priest. He's been quite literally heaven sent. And because of what he's been able to teach me, I'm hoping I'm able to pass this on in the vein in which he gave it to me, because knowledge is only power when it's shared. Some of you might be familiar with something called the Kundalini, and again, this is for a later show. The Kundalini points in your chakra energy. When everything's actually uncluttered and working properly, it's its own natural shield and barrier. But until we can get you to that point, work with the silver and gold armor. And I swear up and down, folks, I've used it since I was a little girl. This works. It takes practice and it takes time. And I didn't bother to ever really put in the practice. I figured it was going to be a one and done. No. Magic is never, ever a one and done, not when you're learning this path. Again, that's just your psychic armor. You can carry various stones that transmute the energy, or will provide you strengthen that shield that you've got going. Now, stuff's still going to slip in, and this is where it's not external, it's somebody you're internally connected to. Now, if your filters and your shields are strong enough, and especially if you're at home, your house should be actually, cleansed and warded to keep the nasties at bay, at least as best you can. And I try and do this at least every 2 weeks, new and full moon, just simply because there's so much stuff that traipses through my place and gets dropped off of people. And speaking of dropping off of people, believe it or not, it was actually customary for a witch to sweep her floor from the back of the dwelling and out the door every night. Now, most people think that's just really good housekeeping. Nope. Witches would sprinkle some blessed salt on their broom and give it a sweep, because that sweeps the energy off and out the door that people tend to shed like skin cells. And we all do it. It's how I can tell who's walked into a room and walked out. I can feel their psychic energy left behind. We all leave an imprint. Everybody's imprint is different. And we'll get into that later, because the more adept the empath is, the more readily available and the more easy it is to discern who it is you're picking up on. And I mean, for myself, if it's somebody that's talking about me on a physical level, and some people have heard this old wives' tale, your right ear, the right side, will start to ring. Now, keep in mind, this is only if people are right-handed. For the left-handed people, it's their left side because that's their actual firing side. Yeah, sea magic is not left or right-handed. It's not left or right path. It's actually universal. Some are just a little more geared towards one side or the other, same as being left or right-handed, darker, lighter path. I mean, I tell people I'm Greg. I've had white practitioners tell me I'm blacker than the Ace of Spades, and I've had black practitioners look at me and tell me I'm lily white. So, I mean, really, it's all in the eye of the beholder. Yay, Popeye, you got your name changed. Awesome. Anyways, folks, now that I've completely derailed my train of thought, where am I? Ah, yes. Earthing, grounding, shielding, warding your home. Now, myself, my personal home, because I do have a way station for spooks, I have 5 stone grids. One at the outside of the property, one about halfway up, one around the house on the outside, and one on the inside. This is also, it allows for a safer place to practice. When I am doing, full-on ritual and spell work, some of my protections are already laid in, so I don't have to worry about it too much other than right where I'm working. Some people use 7, some use 1, some use 3. Use what works for you. There's any combination of stones that you can use for this. I mean, black tourmaline, green aventurine, those are 2 of my biggest favorites for, just keeping away negativity and dispelling energy vampires. I carry them with me. I mean, being a demonologist, I've become exposed to nasty people, nasty energy, nasty beings, nasty entities, period. Good, bad, otherwise, didn't matter if they're a ghost that hasn't crossed over yet, doesn't matter if it's a spirit that's, come back and decided to create havoc because they swore up and down they were going to. You find these in all kinds of places, and you find this stuff in all kinds of ways, and it creeps its way under your skin. We absorb it just like we do moisture, just like we absorb water. But again, what do we do with all of this? Burn off what you can. And I mean, that I cannot stress it enough. Hug a tree. Really, folks, hug a tree. I have an apple tree out back that I pretty much live under some days because life is so overwhelming. And I know some people can develop a bit of an immunity to it. I have for the most part. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I research and dig into and study that many empathic, but many sensitive people find extremely distressing. You'll find typical Scorpio that I am with my head stuffed in some book about a serial killer or, human trafficking, all these other really distasteful subjects that most people don't want to hear about. And because I'm one of those little keeners, I will saturate myself. Many can't. Many have a hard time with it. I know the Reverend has had to get up and leave the room or the house just simply because I've been inundating myself with this stuff for weeks at a time because I'm saturating myself till I learn enough for the moment. This is common for most empaths. We will oversaturate, but if we do, we end up getting very, very sick from it. And this can show up in the form of headaches, muscle pain, especially tension. There's random aches and pains. I often wonder if people like myself who have been diagnosed with fibro are just simply, our nerves have been overloaded throughout our lives to the point where that's what's, destroyed the coding. With people who are empathic and don't know, or especially if kids that are empathic and can't verbalize it, it often comes down to watching body language. Now, most of us don't really watch body language too closely. You should. Body language, facial expressions, especially the micro expressions around the corners of the mouth and the eyes, give it away. I've had people ask me, how did you know what I was thinking? It's not because they're thinking loud. It's not because I'm picking up telepathically, although I've been known to. It's because they're readable. People in poker call it a tell. Every empath has one. What's yours? Good question, huh? What is yours? What is your empathic gift? What are you drawn to? We all have, I've seen lists and lists and lists and lists and lists, oodles of lists of quote unquote psychic skills. I mean, good grief, medium alone probably carries a dozen different subheadings. All of these, people think, oh, psychic? Good. Can you give me the winning lotto numbers? That's not how this works, folks. My favorite thing to tell people, I'm psychic when necessary, but not necessarily psychic. Can I do divination? Sure. Do I know stuff? Yeah. We're all capable of knowing stuff. We're all capable of divining the future. Now, something that we'll get into in probably next week are signs and omens. Now, often we don't see, as an empath, the signs and the omens and the things that the energies around us send us to help guide us on our way. And with empaths being so drawn to animals, this is where you will find animal totems. And I know Lady Stars and Fire does a wonderful show with animal magic. It's fabulous. I've got a couple episodes over on PBN. I know we're doing Throwback Tuesdays. I'm hoping Onyx, if she's listening, hint, hint, will play one or two perhaps next week. Yes, psycho and psychic, fine line between them. It often depends on the amount of zeros they're charging. I've walked into so-called psychic fairs, and my energy has interfered with some of them, or I've picked up the shills and the fakes. And they're out there, folks. They're usually one charging $4.99 a minute. Funnily enough, most really good psychics, and I've seen this with Sylvia Brown. I watched her from as far back as I can remember. It seems when some of the psychics tend to sell out, I can list a half a dozen of them here, and I don't want to get Onyx into trouble by listing any of them off and opening myself up to a libel suit. But I've watched them deliberately use it to make a living, and a really good one. And they've ended up losing the gift. It seems to have faded on them. Towards the end, they usually end up faking it more often than they're not. And I know every psychic, every medium, every empath has a good day and an off day. When they're on, they're really on. And when they're off, they're really off. And sadly, when people come to rely on it for a living and they rely on it to be on, that's when the powers that be seem to start scaling it back, going, no, that's not actually what this is for. So, why are we empathic, folks? Why are we actually physically hardwired like this? Anybody know? I'll give you 2 seconds in the chat room if you don't. What? No keeners? All right. We all have the need to be connected. We're hardwired to be empathic, and deviation from that often results in some of the more violent mental disorders. We see this with people who are schizophrenic, especially. This is actually quite common. Multiple personality disorders. We'll get into that again in a future show, because I've been through my share of psych wards, folks. And yeah, there are legitimately nutjob wackaloons out there, but there's also quite a few people who have been diagnosed as mentally ill, and they're not. They're empathic. Having empathic skills mean you feel everything around you and you absorb it like a sponge. We're often overwhelmed by the incoming barrage of sensations and perceptions, and it's all extraneous, and there are several means to filter it out. And again, it comes back to grounding, earthing, shielding. Those are your three biggest filters. Crystals, yeah, they're great. They have a place, but they shouldn't be your only go-to. Start with your own auric field. You can't leave that behind. You can't forget that in the morning while you're running for work. We often experience the disconnection very early in life, and when that development is affected by environmental and sociological issues, what we experience and feel isn't readily identified for what it is or where it comes from, because we're often not taught to develop that part of ourselves by our elders. And a lot, and I see this in a lot of families. In many cases, it's been lost over time through many factors. Our parents can't teach us what they do not know. Parents of children who are empathic are often at a loss as to how to cope, even in the most functional of households. And I mean, this was the same for my family. It really wasn't the most functional, but they had a good handle on, sensitives and gifteds and psychics, but they didn't realize I kind of fit that category until, I was about 8. They didn't realize I could see and hear dead people and spirits and other things would come to me until I was 10. In the meantime, I've been living with this as long as I can remember, and that goes back to 3 or 4. Kids often have this stuff and they can't really express it. And the grown-ups around them often tell them, oh, it's just your imaginary friend. Yes, Popeye, parents of children are often at a loss. Well, kids do actually come with instruction booklets, folks. We know how we were raised. We know what worked for us and what didn't. This gives you a blueprint for figuring out how to cope with your own children. Now, empathic people often have empathic kids. So if this is as in the case of some of my family generations and some of my family tree, repressed. I mean, it goes back thousands and thousands of years. But the vast majority of my family, my blood family, this is, repressed it, tamped it down, buried it underneath religious dogma of various types, Christian, non-Christian, you name it, you'd find them there. I mean, I come from a line of Baptist ministers. Not something you would expect in a witch's family. So all of these skills and all of these feelings and knowings were repressed, especially in the men. Oh, especially in the men. Women's intuition was acceptable and accepted. Men, manly gut instinct only. Well, folks, and again, we'll get into this at a further point, but gender magic. We have a lot of things in common. Yeah, the plumbing might be different. Yeah, the energy that we put out might be different. But there's a reason we have both genders, and those who are, in between, trans, pans, bi, whatever fits into that rainbow. I mean, there are there's actually one, and I will have to dig up the notes for this. There is one group of people, I do believe it's in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, somewhere like that, Thailand, somewhere in there, where they actually recognize 5 genders. Yeah, 5 genders, including asexual, which has no gender. And that's actually what they aspire to, is that perfect balance of middle of the road. I found myself quite intrigued when I found that episode of Taboo. Like I said, I do some research in the strangest places. People, back to people with empathic and gifted kids. When you know your children, and you should know your kids, you should know them real well, because you're the one raising these little darlings. And I mean, I know this from watching other parents. They watch their kids. They watch them like a hawk, just to see what's going on. And if they don't, and I've been called in for at least 1 or 2 little ones that have had, imaginary friends or things like that the parents were about ready to medicate the poor kid. I usually end up invariably happening along and start, if I can, helping the child to cope and the parents to open their minds. Not always easy. Trust me, not always easy. And we'll find this with people who are dead set in religious dogma. Frequently, we find this a lot. And just to let you guys know, I will be wrapping up in about 5 or 6 minutes. So I will actually make this pretty quick. Next week, I will have something else a little different for you. This is, again, Basics Empaths 101. What are we? You know, why do we feel this way? Next week, we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but we'll start getting into your filtering system and what actually feeds into that. Because once you can block out the extraneous and the exterior, you can actually start to filter your own stuff. And the filters is everything that's come up with you from, pretty much the beginning of time, from the beginning of this life. Stuff you've been programmed with, stuff you picked up, gotten clogged with, stuff you haven't learned yet, lessons like that. That's all plays into the part and parcel of the signs and the omens. The omens themselves and the signs, again, it's all part and parcel. It's all these small bits and pieces. I don't know if any of you have ever worked on a jigsaw puzzle, but this fits together in very much the same way, except the person's given you a box full of puzzle pieces with no picture, and they've shaken the daylights out of them, and you're not quite sure if it's from 3 puzzles or 5. Yeah, quite common, actually. We run into this a lot. I do. I know I personally run into just decluttering every day at the end of the day. Because if I don't, I can't sleep. That's when I end up with that little 3-year-old running around on that hamster wheel, screaming and raving like a lunatic. This is where things like meditation come in, being able to center and focus yourself, being able to just calm your inner being. Not always easy to do. And Bernie, I know you were asking about this last week. Onyx and I did a show 20th of July on something witchy regarding meditation and centering and focusing. And you can actually find tons of information there, and I'll probably do one on it later. I know I have all sorts of shows planned. I don't know where to start. Pardon me. Again, if there's anything you guys would like to hear about, mention it. Hit me up on Facebook. Shoot me a message here. Bernie, it's on YouTube. I'll send you the link. If there's anything you guys want me to cover, hit me up on Facebook, shoot me a line here, get a hold of me through Sacred Grove Radio. If you go to my bio, it takes you directly to my Facebook page. Just click on my little show icon and ta-da! It'll pull up my bio, and at the bottom is a link. Click it. It'll take you to my Facebook page. Hit me up with a friend request. Let me know that this is where you found me, and I will most certainly add you to my page, my friends list, and I am more than happy to share anything and everything I can with you. But if I can if I can help one person, great. But if you can give me an idea that will help not only you, but others around you, like Empaths 101, because I had this asked about just a few days ago, I would be more than happy to share everything I've got with you. Absolutely love to. Would absolutely dearly love to share every nugget. With that in mind, ladies and gents, it's just about my time to be up. I need to leave a few minutes for our wonderful sponsors. They're what actually keep these shows on the air for you. So if you haven't checked them out yet, hit our page, check out our sponsors, check out the other shows, check out our other hosts. There is something for everybody, and there's something new every day. Tomorrow, actually, I lie, is Throwback Tuesday, Flashback Tuesday or Throwback Tuesday. This is where Onyx brings up a couple of shows from our former radio station at PBN before we became their new Sacred Grove Radio. This is definitely worth checking in because I know I haven't waded through everything that was on there. I'm still working on it. But on that note, folks, you have yourselves a wonderful evening. Go with care, go with love, and we will see you here soon again on the Crones Cauldron. Thank you and good night.